So tonight we're rounding up this series on the 7-point mind training. This very day, waking up in something like that, waking up today. I can't remember what the series is. It seems so long ago that we came up with a name, but basically it's mind training, 7-point mind training, and how we practice in this moment, in this day. That's Buddhism for daily life, really, the 7-point mind training. So this is we've got, and just to say, we have copies of the text. So if you didn't get a copy of the text or you've lost it and you want to take one, we've got copies of the text on the table. And tonight's your chance. If you missed evenings and you didn't get the full collection of cards, they're all on the table, so you can complete your collection of slogan cards. So this is the 7-point mind training. Is in Tibetan it's called Lojong. The tradition is called Lojong, and it simply means mind training. Lojong. But mind in Buddhism doesn't mean the brain. We think of brain when we think of mind in the West. But the mind is more like the heart and mind in Buddhism. When we talk of chitta or the Lojong in Tibetan, we're talking about a combination of the heart and the mind. So that's worth bearing in mind as we talk about this tonight. So training the heart and training the mind. And I think you'd be correct in saying the core of Buddhism involves training the heart and training the mind. In a way, that is what Buddhism is. And if you go back to really key texts from key traditions, they all emphasize training the mind. So you've got the Dhammapada, for example, which is considered to be one of the earliest collections of sayings of the historical Buddha. And it's full of verses where the Buddha talks about the importance of training the mind and the danger of an untrained mind. So just for example, there's a chapter on the mind, and the Buddha says, as a fletcher straightens the arrow, so the person of understanding, the wise person, makes straight the trembling, unsteady mind, which is difficult to guard and difficult to restrain. So the Buddha's talking about the difficulty of training and disciplining the mind and the heart. The mind is frivolous and difficult to control, alighting on whatever it pleases. It is good to tame the mind. A tamed mind brings happiness. And it goes on, lots of verses about taming the mind and training the mind. And similarly in the Bodhicharyavatara, which I'll mention later, another really important Buddhist text, really emphasizes training the mind. So you could say this is the core of what Buddhism is training the heart, training the mind. And this particular text, it condenses this whole series, a whole tradition, into a series of verses which can be memorized and practiced. So it's really potent. It contains a whole Buddhist tradition in this particular text. And it's associated with a teacher called Atisha, who is an Indian, very famous Indian Buddhist, who traveled to Indonesia, which was a real hive of Buddhism at the time, historical Indonesia, and he brought back this mind training tradition to India, and then later took it to Tibet, and it became associated very, very strongly with Tibetan Buddhism because Buddhism got wiped out in India shortly after that. So it got preserved. This tradition got preserved in Tibet through the 7 points, through the Lojong and the mind training tradition, and it captures what you could say for me is the essence or the spirit or the magic of Buddhism for me, what's called the Bodhisattva ideal. At the heart of this, it captures and expresses what it might be like to be an enlightened being. And it really captures and emphasizes the altruistic aspect of Buddhism, which got lost a bit in some Buddhist traditions over time. They became a bit dry, a bit scholarly, and they'd lost touch with some of the original emphasis on compassion and altruism. And this text is really potent, and it captures that essence of compassion and wisdom and altruism, the essence of the Bodhisattva. So there's quite a lot in there, and we've been looking at it over the last 3 months, I guess. And I've heard some comments from friends saying, "Oh, but it's a bit too dense. It's kind of complicated. There's lots of complicated stuff in there. It's a bit Tibetan. Can we make sense? Can we access it? Is it a bit inaccessible?" Some people as well might find it challenging. The Bodhisattva ideal is uncompromising. Some of the teachings in here if you're aiming to be the Bodhisattva is somebody who is their sole aim is to liberate all beings from suffering. They transform their heart completely so that they focus all their energies on enlightenment for all beings. It's a very uncompromising ideal. So for some it might seem like not relevant to where we are now, or too challenging, or too far off. But I was thinking about this morning, and I was driving home from the school run and listening to Radio 4, and there was a program, The Life Scientific, and this scientist, Jim Al-Khalili, was interviewing a very famous biochemist. I just heard Vivian Under used to be a biochemist who was telling me at dinner. And so this biochemist was called Raymond Shinazi, and he was an Egyptian refugee, and he got a scholarship to study in the UK and became a biochemist. And he developed drugs which are still used to fight AIDS, to kind of combat AIDS and HIV. He's developed a cure for hepatitis C, and he's working on a cure for hepatitis B, and believes soon he'll have a cure for AIDS as well. And what he said was, impossible is not in my vocabulary. And that really struck me. Impossible is not in my vocabulary. So he's just got this big vision, this big idea that he can come up with a cure for these things. He's done what people might have thought wouldn't be possible. And so I thought that really got to me this morning. Okay, well, the Bodhisattva ideal kind of sounds impossible. It sounds so far off and so impossible, but imagine if you could do that. Imagine if you really were confident and really decided to go for that, you could achieve it. That impossible doesn't have to be in your vocabulary. So it seems something distant, but it's actually achievable for human beings to achieve this. So why not go for it? Why not go for it? And whether or not you're interested in saving all beings from suffering, or you just want to be a bit happier and sort your life out a bit, which probably most of us are more in that boat than wanting to be advanced bodhisattvas, it's the same existential situation and the same antidote, whatever stage you're at. So the Buddha said, the cause of our suffering is a root delusion that we believe in a fixed, unchanging self that's separate from external conditions and separate from what we perceive as the world out there. And that leads to a sense of isolation, disconnection from others. And at the centre of it, at the heart of it, really, disconnection from what we could call our true self, because we just live in a really kind of restricted idea of what we really are. So this is the root of our suffering, the Buddha taught. And the antidote to this, whether you want to help all beings or whether you just want to be a little bit happier, the antidote is to train yourself just to be less selfish, to train yourself to be more aware of other people, to train your heart in kindness and empathy and compassion, and to train your mind in wisdom, to train your mind to see things more clearly, to question your stories about reality and about yourself. Notice when those stories cause you pain and they don't add up. So it's the same existential situation no matter where you are on the path, and the same cause of suffering and the same antidote. You train your heart and mind in compassion, and you train your heart and mind in wisdom. And this is, in a sense, what the 7-point mind training is about, which I shall hopefully explain now. And what I want to do in this talk is, my brief is to round up the series. I also want to go back out through the text and draw out what I think are the most valuable messages to take away. So what are the kind of, I think, 4 key valuable aspects of the 7-point mind training to really take away and hopefully just apply for the rest of your life? That's what I would hope. I find these really, really useful messages. I hope you do as well. So the first thing to take away from the 7-point mind training is that you can practice the Dharma in adversity. So the 7-point mind training says, turn adverse conditions into the path to enlightenment. So often we can have the idea that I'll practice at some point in the future, I'll really take my Buddhism seriously at some point in the future when my life's sorted out, or when I'm on a good retreat, everything will be sorted out, and then I'll really practice. And actually what the 7-point mind training says is, when life is tough, that's when you can practice. It's an opportunity to transform yourself, to train your heart and mind. Adverse conditions are an opportunity to grow. So every situation, even no matter how tough it is, is a situation where you can practice and transform yourselves. This is a key message to take away. So it brings the Bodhisattva ideal into very much down to earth, which is why we came up with this title of this very day. It's in this very situation and this particular mind and heart, your mind and heart, which might seem like not the ideal mind and heart to turn into a Buddha, but actually we haven't got any other mind and heart. It's this mind and heart that you've got is what you need to transform. And this situation with whatever's going on is the context to practice. So just a couple of situations. So last week Janet was talking about, I just remember it struck in my mind about people not giving way on Sheffield Hills really makes her irritable. And I can really kind of connect with that and just see that for Janet. And so that's an adverse situation. Somebody isn't treating you with respect. They're not following the rules of Sheffield Hills. They're supposed to give way to each other. But in that situation, noticing that she's got irritable, Janet was able to transform that to work in that situation. When that irritability arises, you transform it, you get tested and you can transform it. When the world pushes your buttons, you can practice. A couple of weeks ago, we got burgled. Our house, we got burgled. Someone broke into our house, stole the car key, took the car keys and stole our car. And I thought, in a way, it's great to have been working through the series and think, well, this is a test. This is a test of my practice in a way. How steady and unshakable am I really? Can I be steady and unshakable or not? Let's find out. Let's find out over the next few days. How attached am I to possessions? Let's find out over the next few days. Like how shaken am I by loss and gain, and how grateful am I to people? Like it was just like what came out of that situation was it was a real opportunity to connect with my neighbours. Actually, some neighbours I'd never spoken to before that I moved in a year or so ago, and I was a little bit suspicious of them because I'd never seen them, and they have the curtains drawn. Like, what's going on with these neighbours? They're not so friendly. And then they came out and they'd captured some useful footage on their CCTV cameras and said, "Oh, we really hope we can help." And another neighbour just kept offering to drive me places, and just I was walking on the street and he'd drive alongside me in his car saying, "Can I take you somewhere?" I said, "No, I don't need a lift." And he was really disappointed. He really wanted to drive me places. So okay, well, adversity can present lots of opportunities. Actually, it was an opportunity to practice gratitude to all the people that were helping me and to connect with other people, and then also just to kind of reflect, what might have been going on for the person that broke into our house. What kind of situation might they be in? What kind of mental state might they be in? What kind of life are they living? Maybe it's somebody who can't afford to feed their family, for example, just to pick a potential scenario, or somebody, a young person's got in just with a difficult situation, or gang of people. It's like, what kind of situation is that person in? And it just helps to remove the fear and anger, it's a possibility. When there's adversity, it's a possibility. In fact, it's a great opportunity to practice. And the way mind training works is that root delusion of a fixed and separate, unchanging self and ego, it pops up when things go wrong, or it might arise with anger or irritability or jealousy or fear, but it's when it shows up, when we get blamed for something, or when we lose something, or when we're seeking praise for something. It's in those situations that it reveals itself. That kind of root view reveals itself, and it's an opportunity to transform that, to work with that, to apply the antidote. So the 7-point mind training uses the language of alchemy. It talks about it being like an elixir-like instruction, and with alchemy, base metal gets transformed into gold. So it's transforming the base metal of our emotions, our reactions, into the gold of a wise, compassionate heart, to training our heart and training our mind. When those emotions, those reactions arise, we can spot and we can train ourselves. Okay, so that's the first thing to take away. You can practice in adversity. That's what the 7-point mind training says, which just is really liberating, because any situation you can practice. If you've got a mind and you've got a heart, you can train it in any situation. And the second thing to take away is something I've already mentioned, is that you can train your mind in both wisdom and compassion. That's what the mind training emphasizes. So first of all, just to kind of draw this out a bit more, so in terms of training the mind in wisdom, you can start to really, or train yourself just to see through the stories that you might be telling about a situation or about a person or about a relationship. So, a typical story of mine might be, this is a catastrophe. Whatever, it might be I might wake up in the early hours of the morning, this is a catastrophe. And then my mind will create stories about it. And then it can be very powerful just to question that, maybe in the morning, just wait, is that really a catastrophe? Is that really so bad? And often just questioning it, once you start to notice that you're telling a story about a situation or a person, just questioning the story just weakens it, and it can sometimes just dissolve away. One of the verses in this wisdom section says, see all dharmas as dreamlike, which is one of the slogan cards. And it's like in that state when you're kind of, in a dream, it's almost like waking up from a dream, when you're in the grip of a story about something that seems really real and all the emotions of that story are playing out. And then you suddenly see through that story and it's just dissolved like a dream that you've woken up from. Oh no, that's not a catastrophe. Or that person's out to get me. Oh no, they're not out to get me, are they? They're not my enemy. Just a story can dissolve when you see it as more dreamlike. So we talk about in Buddhism having second and third arrows. There's a situation which is causing us dukkha, causing us suffering, and we add extra arrows. That's the first arrow, and we add extra arrows, a second and third arrow, with our stories, our interpretations. And if we keep questioning that in these situations that are painful, question the story, we can remove the second and third arrows. And if we keep doing that, keep questioning the stories, eventually we'll get to that first arrow, the root of the suffering will be removed. So we can train our mind in wisdom, and we can also train our mind and our heart in compassion. Particularly when there's adversity, when something happens that's painful for you, it's an opportunity. Well, two things could happen. One is you kind of really withdraw into yourself and pull away from other people because there's pain and it's hurting and you don't like it, and you kind of withdraw from other people and from the world. But there's another opportunity here to turn outwards towards other people, to use it as an opportunity to connect with others, to empathize. So when you're experiencing suffering, you can connect with other people who are experiencing that suffering. So it might be grief, loss, pain, disappointment. Your football team might have lost in the final of a big championships. Well, every other country lost as well, apart from one. Like everybody around Europe who's into football, has experienced that disappointment. Apart from the Spanish, we can be pleased for the Spanish because it's an opportunity to develop empathy and compassion, and just to connect with. That's quite a trivial situation, but there's, in a way, you can quite easily say, well, that's just universal. Everybody's experiencing that, and it hurts. And it's an opportunity to connect with other people with their experience. So, similarly with grief, I've heard powerful stories of friends of mine who've lost a really close relative and been in the midst of grief, which has walked around Sheffield and thought, that person has probably also lost their parent, or this person has also probably lost their parent. It's an opportunity just to connect with you, the emotions of yourself as a human being, the same emotions that every other human being experiences, and it's an opportunity to remove that distance. You can really be in the shoes and the experience of other people. So that's a real opportunity. If you're experiencing pain and dukkha, that's a real opportunity to connect with the pain and the dukkha of other human beings. And there's a term that Dr. Ambedkar used, he was very fond of it. It's a term that comes from the Indian language called manuski. And manuski is something like the human beingness of each of us, that we've each got this kind of this universal human beingness that it means we can all connect with each other. It's involved, it's kind of a connotation of respect for each other and love for each other. It's just there's a universal human beingness that we've all got, and we can train ourselves to connect with other people, to become aware of others in this way, to empathise with others in this way. And adversity is an ideal opportunity. So we can train in wisdom and we can train in compassion. That's the second thing to take away from the mind training. So the first one, we can train in adversity. And the second thing, we can train both in wisdom and we can train in compassion. Okay, and then the third thing that's, I think, really useful to take away from the 7-point mind training is a teaching called the 5 forces. So Vimala Dasa led a really good week on this. He gave a talk explaining what the 5 forces were, and it was a week called Making Change Happen. And those of us who are here, we kind of each undertook for the week ahead to make a change in our lives, to make some changes in our life, and to use the 5 forces to be successful, to make that happen, and to support each other to do that. It was a really powerful week. So just to recap what the 5 forces are and how you can use them to train yourself, to train your heart and mind. So the first of the 5 forces, so this is a verse in that actually it comes from the mind training that says, this brief essential instruction should be applied with the 5 forces. And that's all it says. It doesn't tell you what the 5 forces are. It kind of assumes. It assumes a lot, the 7-point mind training text, actually. There's a lot to unpack. So what the 5 forces are, the first one is motivation. There's a term called chanda. And chanda means desire, longing. It's when you really, really want to do something. Human beings, when we really want to do something, we'll do it, we'll achieve it. If you really, really want something, you'll make it happen. We're really good at achieving things that we want. And so the thing to do is, if there's a change you want to make in your life, if there's something you want to train yourself in, and we'll come on to at the end of the talk and in the group, so what might that be for you? What might it be that you want to train yourself in? The first thing to do is to really recognise how great it would be if you could do that, if you could achieve that. What difference would it make to your life and to the lives of the people around you if you made that change? And just reflect on that, keep that in mind. And then you'll be really motivated to do it. So it might be to meditate regularly, to meditate every morning. Just reflect regularly. Take time. What would my life be like if I could meditate regularly every morning or twice a day or whatever it is you want to train yourself in? Cultivate a motivation, a strong motivation, chanda, a desire, a real wish to do this. And if you do that, you'll do it. But actually, it's not enough. You go a long way if you really want it, but you might forget. So the second force of the 5 forces is familiarization. It's reminding ourselves, because human minds, if it's like my human mind, will forget. You'll really just, I really, really want to do that. And then a few days later, you've completely forgotten. And that probably is the experience of people who try to do the Make Change Happen week, the urban retreats. So at some point in the week, you forget probably one of the things you've said you're going to do. So how are you going to remember the force of familiarization? What practical thing can you do to remember? And so there's been some quite innovative ideas over the years in our Sangha, but there might be, you stick a post-it note. Do people still have post-it notes? Yeah, people are nodding. Stick a post-it note somewhere strategic with the thing you're trying to train yourself in so you don't forget. Stick a Buddha image on your desk at work, and that just reminds you, oh yeah, I'm trying to be kinder, I'm trying to be wiser. Set an alarm on your phone. Your friends could message you to remind you. Tell your friends and your Dharma friends, your Sangha friends, I'm really trying to make this change. And then they can remind you, they can send you a message. So think about, how are you going to remind yourself? How are you going to remember that you want to do this? The third one is the one that translates least easily. That's not probably the best English, but the one that doesn't translate as well into English is the white seed. And traditionally in Tibetan Buddhism, this would be, you do something really generous, and then all the merit, all the benefit that you'd gain from being generous, you dedicate to the success of this thing you want to achieve. So you could do that. You could do something really generous and then say to yourself, I'm going to dedicate all the benefits of this generosity to the success of this. But we translate this a little bit differently. You might be just that you need to do something really that sends a really striking message to your depths. Do you remember from the intermediate courses, that analogy of the horse and the rider, where we have this intention, we're going to do something, we're going to make a change, but our depths, our deeper nature, our horse has got other ideas in a way. It's going to do something different. So the white seed is something that sends a strong message, a powerful message to our depths that we really mean this, we really want to do this. And often that could involve shrines and ritual. So think about how you're going to communicate that to your depths, that you really mean this, you really want to do this. The fourth force of the 5 forces is the force of destruction. And we interpret this as, well, what's going to get in the way? What are the obstacles of you achieving this thing that you want to train yourself in? Like in your regular routine, what gets in the way? Say it's meditation. It might be on Wednesday, I'm going to go out. This is not something it might be a hypothetical person who's going to go out really late night clubbing on Wednesday. They're not going to get up and meditate on Thursday. So what are you going to do? Okay, well, I'm going to have an early night instead. This is really important to me. I want to get up to meditate. So I'm going to drink water. And not what I did when I went out with friends recently. I drank loads of Coca-Colas and then just lay awake all night because I've had so much caffeine. I'm not used to going out for nights out very often. I met up with some university friends and then lay awake after having several Coca-Colas. So you could be, in a way, it's the force of destruction, is anticipating what might go wrong. Well, what might go wrong in the week ahead? How are you going to combat that? How are you going to destroy those obstacles? What are you going to do? What are you going to put in place so that you're not derailed, that you can keep your aspiration? The force of destruction. And the final force, maybe the most effective force, is the force of aspirational prayer, which kind of sounds countercultural in our society, maybe, but try it. And we've been during this series of talks, we've been chanting the mantra of Green Tara, who's associated with compassion and wisdom. And if I just pass these to Paddy, there's some on the lectern, some copies of the Tara mantra that you could take away. And just have a go. If you're experiencing adversity and you're struggling to keep your intention, just try invoking the help of a bigger mind than yours, a bigger heart than yours, through mantra. And you could try the Green Tara mantra, Om Tare, Tu Tare, Tu Re Swaha. And you can view that it might be a bigger aspect of yourself that you're not aware of yet, or it could be that you're invoking something external to you, which is a bigger mind than yours. But either way, try it and you might be surprised. Keep an open mind. The force of aspirational prayer. So that's thing number 3 to take away. We've had, you can practice in adversity, you can train your heart and mind in wisdom and compassion. Use the 5 forces. That's a really important message from the 7th mind training. And then the final part, I think, of the mind training to take away is one of the things that the mind training does really, really well. It packs all of this teaching and all of your intention into a slogan that you can write on a post-it note or on your arm, like Vimaladasa and Sangha Gita have done. They've written slogans on their arm. Something small and punchy and pithy that you can remember and learn by heart and really take on board. So there's some fantastic slogans in the 7-point mind training. And it might be, there's just, what is it about the Bodhisattva that really inspires you? This being who is so advanced that they live their life dedicated to the liberation of all beings. And the kind of, the slogans can be really challenging, but they're kind of pointing at how an enlightened being would behave. And then they're also giving us an instruction about what we can do to train, what we can train in to become more like that. So in a way, some of them might seem almost impossible again. But going back to our friend, the biochemist, impossible doesn't have to be in your vocabulary. You could train in this, and then you could become that. You could become whatever it is. So some fantastic slogans. So I would just remind you of some of the slogans we've had. Always have the support of a cheerful mind. What a difference that would make to your life if you always had the support of a cheerful mind. What a difference it would make to the life of the people that you're in contact with if they always meet a cheerful person. Like that, what an amazing mind that would be to train and to develop. And some other very practical ones, don't talk about weak points. We've just got a real tendency to focus on negatives and faults. Another one says, don't think about others' faults. So just what if you took that as your training for the rest of your life, just to focus on other people's strengths and their good qualities? What kind of a person would you train yourself? What could you become? Don't get excited by cutting remarks. Don't hold grudges. Don't offend others. Don't rely on external conditions. Could you develop a mind that doesn't depend, your happiness doesn't depend on external conditions? It's something that wells up from within. Is that something you can train yourself in? Don't make a fuss. Very, very practical. Don't make a fuss. Don't be irritable. We heard about that one last week. Don't expect thanks. Don't be temperamental. So there's some really brilliant slogans in the mind training and in other texts like the Dhammapada and the Bodhicitta. It might be you've encountered one of the slogans during this series that really inspires you, that's got chanda for you, that you're really motivated. Well, wouldn't that be great if I could train in that? And the invitation is to take something away from this series, take away something that you want to train in, and apply some of these teachings from the 7-point mind training. Use it in adversity. Come on in. So you can use these teachings in adversity. You can train in wisdom and compassion. You can use the 5 forces, and you can have slogans that you really take to heart and practice, really practice. You can't practice all of the Dharma, but you can practice one thing really, really wholeheartedly. So pick something that you're going to practice really wholeheartedly and make a slogan. It might be there's already a slogan that captures it in the 7-point mind training. If not, make your own slogan up that really captures it for you. And that's what we'll be doing shortly in the groups. We'll go into the groups very soon and come up with a slogan, something that you, if you want to, that you are going to take away and really try and apply yourself to. So I'd just end by saying, well, whether you're just wanting to be happy yourself or whether you want to make all beings happy, either way, you need to train your heart and you need to train your mind. And basically what it boils down to is to be less selfish and more aware of other people, just to train yourself in that altruism, that response of reaching out to other people. And then you can train your mind to see more clearly, to question your stories about yourself and about reality, and notice when those stories cause you suffering. So you can train yourself in wisdom and compassion. Well, I'll do 2 things. I want to end by just reading out a sense of, what of the goal in a way, or the thing that sounds impossible, but doesn't have to be impossible, which is the culmination of this path, the culmination of this training is the heart and mind of a bodhisattva, who is, there's no limit to their wisdom and their compassion. And this is how they respond to the suffering of living beings. And this is a section we chant at the end of our puja, which comes from the Bodhicitta. So this is the words of a bodhisattva, and it might sound impossible, but impossible doesn't have to be in our vocabulary. With no sense of loss, I give myself to the Buddhas. I give my merits for the benefit of all. May I be the doctor, may I be the nurse for all beings until the world is cured. May I be a light for those who are lost. May I be a harbour for those that need shelter. Like the earth and the water, like the fire and the air, may I be a servant to beings on earth until the world is whole. Just as the Buddhas before me set their minds on enlightenment, just as they trained on the Buddha's path, so now I too, for the welfare of the world, set my mind on enlightenment. So now I too will train on the Buddha's path. Today, in the presence of the Buddhas, I invite the world to be my guest at a great feast of delight. May all beings rejoice. That seems like a good place to end the series. So as I mentioned before, what are you going to take away from the